everybody. Welcome to today's presentation. Let me get my screen share going on here. I'm Jamie. I am from Ambition's marketing team. I work with our enterprise and partner marketing functions, and I'm here with Garrett. He is our senior, or one of our senior SDRs, one of our first SDRs, maybe the first one ever, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So we go way back, watched him blossom into like a, a formidable hustler. He's the best. So thank you for joining us today. And Chris, thank you for lending us yourself and Garrett and getting off the phones. Chris is our head of sales development here at Ambition. So hopefully between the three of us, we can tackle your questions. A little housekeeping before we get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Hold on. I don't know how to use a computer right now. All right. So a little housekeeping before we get started. We will share this presentation with you guys. If you need to log off or you want to share with all your friends, we got you covered. You'll get it in an email from us probably tomorrow. There's a thunderstorm, so if you hear that, that's fun. Summer in the South. We're in Nashville and Chattanooga. And also you are muted, but please feel free to this is interactive. This is gonna be a casual conversation about today's topics. If you have questions, comments, please put those into the chat and I'll be monitoring that as we go. If you say something hot and controversial, I may stop and we may pivot, who knows? This is our time together. So to kick things off though, if you're not familiar with us, and I know some people, I didn't recognize all the names on the list. We're Ambition. We are a sales coaching gamification software. And we're the #1 sales gamification and coaching software according to our friends and fans on G2. So that's all fun. And what are we talking about today? So we named this presentation cheekily, Your Sales Floor has Left the Building. And really what that means is it's no secret we're all kind of in the same boat right now. Suddenly, starting in March, every single person was working from their homes. People are trying to parent, and I've got a sick dog today, and there's just all kinds of stuff going on. But we also polled sales leaders specifically in May, and 58% of those in June, and 58% of those sales leaders reported that they were 100% in the office at the beginning of 2020, and now their teams are 100% remote. So huge shifts happening across the board, just to give you some data there. More than 50% reported adjusting revenue targets and forecasts. I'm sure we did as well as a result of what's happening right now. 80%, and this likely has maybe like lightened up a little bit. We can kind of get into that today, but 80% of people paused hiring, reduced spending on travel, of course, new hires, and buying new software, which if you're selling software to people, that kind of poses some challenges. So we'll talk about that a little bit today. And for enterprises, for those big companies, they never imagined that they would be in this spot. So less than 6% of enterprise sales orgs were formally equipped at the beginning of 2020 to telecommute. So overnight, these people are shipping laptops out. They are trying to get everyone online. We're all feeling it. We're all in the same boat here. We also polled some sales leaders a little while back. This is pretty recently. And of a list of things that are kind of on their minds, the #1 thing was just low morale. They're really struggling to supplement that culture, that buzz, making sure that everybody feels like a cohesive team and unit. And that even actually came before sort of visibility into what they're doing, but that was a very close second. So the second thing is I feel like I don't know what my team is doing every day. I do not know how to keep track of this. They're also struggling just to communicate effectively across their teams. And very few people, I should have made that one even tinier, said that they have no challenges. This is just easy breezy for them. I would love to know what's up there. So today we're going to kind of talk about how do you recreate that buzz on the sales floor from home? How do you make sure, little Corona, so I'm very proud of this slide. How do you make sure your reps are actually doing the things that they're supposed to be doing to track and hit those goals? How do you make your one-on-ones have an impact in this environment? That's already kind of a struggle. That's something, that's top of mind for people, but it is especially difficult right now when we are not in person. And how do you keep your goals, insight when there are reduced budgets and dwindling pipeline and wishy-washy prospects. So we're probably all feeling these things. So today we're going to talk about remote onboarding. Chris has a lot of experience with that. He was in the thick of onboarding 3 or 4 people right when all of this went down. So we'll talk about kind of what we learned there and just some tips for you. We'll talk about some really creative contests and competitions that we ran to keep everyone tracking to goal that I think are really, really smart. We'll also talk about tips to sort of ensure that your remote one-on-ones are actually impactful and that you are giving them the structure that they need to be successful. And then we're going to, this is my favorite part. So not that I'm going to rush through the rest, but I feel like everyone wants to know if you have met Garrett, if he has outbounded to you. We're going to learn how to steal some of Garrett's secret outbound mojo for ourselves and for your teams. So without further ado, guys, and I'm going to put I'm getting blown up on text here. Yeah, I'm excited. So right off the bat, and like I said, we have questions from the audience. I know a lot of you wrote in. So if you do have questions now as we go through, let us know. And I will also be getting to some questions that you guys asked. So I've got those already built in. So to kick things off, so Chris, I really do want to start with a question that I'm seeing a lot. Everyone is sort of trying to tap into, what is the sales stack or what is the sales tool stack? Everyone wants to know what their neighbor is using, especially as we're remote right now. I think, everyone kind of had maybe some piecemeal things, and now everyone's like, okay, I need to know, like, what's it look like? How do I keep everybody aligned? So I feel like we've really zeroed in on what works. I feel like the sales team specifically at Ambition has what they need, and you guys are always looking at new stuff. So are there any new tools that we're investing in as a result of going remotely? And just kind of give us the rundown of what we're using. We'll start there.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. Anytime that budgets are tight, one of the first things you're looking at is, what are we spending on in our tech stack? Are we getting the most out of it? And so we certainly went through that process, and a lot of our customers are doing the same thing. And so from a high level, what we're using, Salesforce is our CRM. So that's kind of the hub for everything. Sales engagement tool is Outreach. So we're a heavy user of Outreach. Next is, I gotta plug our own product. And like, honestly, and I kind of background story on me is I came to Ambition because I purchased the tool at another company. And so I was already using it, saw the benefits of it. So I feel like I can speak with some validity here, but it really, in this remote world, I don't know, as a sales manager, I could function without it. And we'll talk a lot more about specifics on that later. But we're also, some other tools, we're using Chorus for recordings for our sales reps, ZoomInfo for data, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. That's kind of the majority of the tools there in the stack.
Nice. And so Garrett, as I mentioned, Garrett is a #1 hustler stunner on the SDR team. That's how old I am. I think that's still a cool term. So you're kind of known in the world. You don't give up. You're very tenacious. You're ambitious, some would say. What's a typical day's usage of that tool stack look like for you? And kind of walk us through, and genuinely, I don't know the answer. So I'm curious, like, what does a typical week look like? Like, do you do all your prospecting on one day? Do you do all your calls on a different day? Like, walk us through what that looks like.
Yeah, good question. So Chris pretty much covered all the tools that I use on a day-to-day. To dive into those a little bit more, we use ZoomInfo, and I'm pretty heavily use that in combination with LinkedIn. So for me personally, I do a lot of my outreach on social, which we'll talk more about later. But one tactic that's really helpful for me is ZoomInfo kind of gives you insight into who is active on LinkedIn in like the last 6 months. So for me, from a prospecting perspective, when I'm looking for prospects and on ZoomInfo, I also have LinkedIn pulled up. Like you mentioned, I do a lot of my prospecting at the beginning of the week. So I like to kind of block off Mondays to really front load my week, or even my month, so to speak, of getting a lot of good personalized high touches started. So I'm doing a lot of prospecting pre-writing a lot of emails, kind of setting myself up to have a lot of good soft touches throughout the week, throughout the month, so that when I am calling on people, they know who I am, they know why I'm calling.
Mhm.
So we use outreach for that sales engagement piece, and then obviously use ambition to kind of tie it all together. A shameless plug here once again. You know, ambition is all about knowing how you're tracking towards your goals. And so for me, when that prospecting piece is done, I can get on ambition and see, okay, what do I need to do more of? And from there, yeah, that's kind of how I use outreach, Zoom, and ambition.
Cool. And so that's just sort of like you start at the beginning of the week, but the usage, like basically each day you're chipping away at that beginning of the week plan. That's cool. Stephanie has a question. Are we using any kind of training tool or LMS for onboarding, which will segue into my next question about onboarding. What are we using any kind of sales enablement tools like that? I know on the marketing side, we use Guru, which is just a way, it's not necessarily an LMS, but it is a way for us to definitely bridge that gap between, okay, like for instance, after we do this webinar, I'll upload it and then I'll make a card so that in the future, if they're searching for keywords like, okay, I need some content about blah, 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 that's available to them. So, yeah. Oh, thanks, Kira. Kira does not work here. Thank you. Ambition University has awesome videos and tutorials. So yeah, if you are a user of our product, and there probably are likely customers here on the line today, we do have something called Ambition University, which has all of our help documentation, and just also, if you go to ambition.com, I believe it's /resources. I'm terrible at marketing. We'll send out some stuff. We also have tons of stuff. Our blog is a great resource as well. And isn't necessarily ambition specific. You don't have to be a user to glean insights and information from that. We try to be pretty tactical. We also are, after this, fun fact, we'll send you some templates as well for some of the things that we'll talk about today, from coaching to gamification and things too. So that's a great point. Yeah, we use a lot of our own resources, but no, we don't have we aren't using an LMS. Is that correct, Chris?
Good question, Stephanie. Not currently using an LMS. Definitely see the value there. That's something we've talked about, but don't have a tool like that in the stack right now.
Yeah. And actually a good question for that too is, I feel like we're probably only approaching a team size internally where that would start to make sense. We've been like I said, Garrett, I guess 2 years ago was our only SDR. That team has exploded, and Chris can actually talk about that. It's a great segue into sort of tips for remotely onboarding new reps. So Chris joined in October of last year. Is that correct? Did I make that up?
Beginning of this year, so January.
Oh, beginning of this year. I'm like adding months on. I feel like I've known Chris for 5 years. Yeah. So Chris joined at the very beginning of this year. Oh, you poor thing. In January, and then immediately was tasked with hiring some new reps. And I think they got to spend a whopping month together, possibly before everything hit the fan. So tell me just a little bit more about that. What was that process like? Lumps and all, like I feel like I learned from mistakes. So like what didn't work? What was the biggest challenge? And then just kind of walk us through like how you got past that and how you, what worked.
Yeah. So one of the first challenges that you mentioned is I was onboarding myself while I'm onboarding some of these SDRs. So that was definitely challenging. But yeah, I mean, there's no way around it. It's, a difficult time. We got 1 month into in-office onboarding, and then we sent everybody home. And so, I would say the key things, and in hindsight, there's a lot of things that we can change, which I'll mention here in a second. But the top 3 things that were most important for getting those folks up to speed quickly was just, one is like, and it's really intuitive, but communicate like crazy. I had to schedule 2 to 3, one-on-one check-ins with each of those individuals a week, just to make sure that they felt supported and were on track to meeting their onboarding goals. We also spun up a couple different things. One was, I called it office hours, where I literally just, got a Zoom meeting up, and we sat there and didn't have to be going over anything, but they were just prospecting. I was working on some emails, but if they had a question during that hour, they could just easily, as if we were in the office, like tap me on the shoulder and say,
Yeah.
hey, how do I do this? And so that was like one way to try to replicate the in-office experience. We also did daily video recaps. You know, if we had any key learnings throughout the day, I would just do a 4-minute video at the end of the day, just to make sure that information was dispersed across the team. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing I would say that was really helpful for us was to gamify everything that happens in that onboarding process. And this is one of the good things about Ambition is we could create a separate scorecard for our onboarding reps, different from like our senior reps like Garrett, who are, actually, trying to set really high quality meetings. Whereas if you're in your first month of being an SDR, we want you to be checking off things like shadowing demos and, doing prospecting and stuff like that. And so we created separate scorecards for those individuals so that they could still compete in competitions.
Oh, nice.
Against Garrett, right? So gamifying that was another really important piece. And then the third is the peer-to-peer coaching and shadowing. That just happens really naturally when you're in the office, but we had to be really intentional about that now that we were remote. So Garrett was actually a huge help with this, just spending time with our newer reps, making sure that they, could ask him questions and get some of those best practices from him.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, Garrett, what was that experience like? Because you actually do have a unique perspective, having been the first SDR. And so it's like you saw plenty of other people get, start the team, and they were just in there with you shoulder to shoulder. And for everyone listening, I believe our entire SDR team is all located in the same place now, right? Like everyone's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And so there was this amazing, I was very jealous when I would drive up from Nashville of the culture in that room. I mean, we called it the wolf den. Like it was just people just, it was super energy, super loud, super fun. What was it like to like what was the difference between when somebody started in that environment and these poor babies starting during like a lockdown, and how did that differ for you, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, it was obviously different, kind of mission, that collaboration piece. And like Chris kind of said earlier, I don't know how we would have done it without Ambition. Mm-hmm. But it was really cool for me to kind of get to be a mentor for onboarding reps. One thing that was super cool for me, and I think that I'll probably practice as I move forward in my career, is the idea of shadowing other reps, even on Zoom. So, as a new SDR at Ambition, I would openly share my Zoom link and say, hey, I'm going to be doing some prospecting at this time. I'm going to be making cold calls during this time. Kind of block my schedule off so that if somebody did want to kind of see how I do things or see what goes into having a successful day as an SDR at Ambition, they could just hop on the Zoom link and kind of shadow me and, just learn what they can pick up from the trial and errors that I've learned.
Yeah. Okay. So I have to ask, just transparently, you guys are both great at your jobs, but what's something you did that was a mess up? That's how I learn. I'm like, okay, what did you do bad?
I would say we definitely did not have enough of our resources documented. It was a lot of like, all of this information is in the brains of these human beings in the room.
Yeah.
And we send everybody home and we don't have a great playbook to send them to say, okay, if you know X, Y, and Z, like you're going to be good on this. And so we definitely had to scramble to try to put some documents together. That was definitely a miss.
It was painful. As someone who exhaustively documents things, I feel very validated right now. So this is great. But that's awesome. I mean, and I think that is a very, very common problem for people. So I think it's good to know We're all just figuring this out together, guys. So you mentioned competitions and contests, and obviously, again, we're not trying to like hard sell you, but we obviously use Ambition to run some contests and competitions. We'll get that out of the way. But you know, the technology is only as good as some of the ideas that you have for those competitions, and I feel like Chris specifically is kind of a master of coming up with fun, creative contests and competitions. And I've learned a lot from you. So yeah, walk us through. I want you to explain where Wheel to Win came from, talk about the poker tournament, and then talk about any other ones that I don't know about, so that I can make templates out of them and share them with people. This is just my webinar to like, this is basically a meeting that you guys are watching with Chris. But yeah, tell us more about like sort of where you get those ideas, explain those ideas, share them with people. Yeah, and let's take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, I try to just think of fun competitions. Doesn't even have to be in sales that I've done before. Like the Will to Win challenge came from, you know, I mean, Wheel of Fortune was the inspiration there, right? And then the sales poker. You know, I enjoy playing poker, so like, like make this into a sales competition.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's kind of the inspiration. I think the inspiration, those ideas are less important. The execution is just super important, right? Because you can spin up a cool idea, but if you don't have some good parameters, like you don't have good metrics for tracking, you don't have good prizes, it's not going to be motivating to the sellers.
Right.
And so that's what I would say. I would say make sure that you're incenting the right behaviors. So pick the true metrics that are going to be like pushing the behaviors that you want. Think about the time limit. Like, is it a short competition that you just need an extra sprint on calls? Or is this going to be a quarterly competition that you want to like really change some big time behaviors? So really take notice of that. And then, you know, think about your scoring as well. Like scoring is really hard, especially when you have a mixed group where you've got some A players and then you've got some folks who are just onboarding. So a lot of times what we're doing is for the competition, it's getting you to a threshold. So basically there's not one winner for the competition. If you make it to a certain threshold, we can have 4 or 5 different winners of the competition. Yeah, so those are just a couple things that I would suggest. And then the prizes that you give out, I definitely would say stay away from gift cards. Like Garrett can speak to it. I don't know from a seller's perspective. I just think giving out the gift cards, I see definitely less of a lift if you're able to give out like some kind of experience, or like we've got a guy on the team who is really into mountain biking. And so he won a competition. I got him some, you know, stuff for his mountain bike. And that was just like, he loved that. Right. So those are just some ideas that will mix it up.
One time marketing ran a competition and Garrett won, and we're horrible at, at running competitions because we forget to give people the prizes. So Garrett did something great. He won. And then like, I think 6 months later, he was like, hey, by the way, I didn't get my prize. And I was like, holy crap, I work at a company that does this. And I think we gave you whiskey. Which was, I think, really good. And to your point, better than a gift card. Yeah. So I think to your point, though, I mean, we say this a lot when it comes to prizes and incentives, it can be a mix. And we have a different presentation. I can actually share this with you guys too, that goes into a little bit more of like the nitty gritty details of structuring different types of competitions. And like when you do a blitz and when you do this, so I can share that out with you guys. But I think it's definitely important to remember that the prize that you're giving, you know, if it's a month-long competition, you don't want to give something piddly. You want it to feel like a really earned thing. And maybe it is a monetary, you know, incentive. I don't know if you guys have done this yet since you've been here, but do you want to tell people about the Billboard competition? Because I think that's like the best prize. I don't even remember what they were competing on, but the prize itself is like super creative and fun. Whoever wants to explain it.
Yeah, our account executive team every Q3 does a Billboard competition, and essentially, you know, the AE with the top sales in Q3 gets to design their own billboard. and choose the location that they want to show it. And we've done this for a few years, and it's amazing the response we get to it, because no, it's not a cash prize. It's something that no one would ever buy for themselves, right? Like, but it's you know, I mean, one of the past sellers put a billboard up like in their hometown where all of their like, you know, friends would be passing by, you know, every day. And so it's just a really cool, you know, idea, and gets a really good lift from the team.
Yeah. And most of it's like trash talking sports, like references that I don't get, that I'm like, man, I bet that's mean. So it's super fun. Stephanie has a really good idea, or a really good question. Can you share an example of a time when the wrong behaviors were incentivized unintentionally? This is super common, and something that I know we help people avoid a lot. So whoever wants to take that one.
Yeah, I mean, the classic example of this, and I've been guilty of this so often, is you incent on a metric like calls. So I'm like, guys, you know, the call volume is so low, we've got to make more calls. And so if you just look at one metric like calls and incent on that, you probably are going to accomplish your goal and get more calls, but the quality of those calls is going to plummet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not
Garrett's
really
calling his grandma. Garrett's calling my grandma.
Exactly. So you're really telling the reps, like, you should be saying, like, I want calls, but I want them to be quality calls. So you try to look at other metrics alongside just the call volume. So how many connects are you having? How much talk time is involved with those calls? So that's a classic mistake I've made, and I think a lot of sales teams do as well.
Totally. So, you know, I think this is a good transition. So we talked about onboarding, we talked about incentivizing people, getting them kind of fired up, that buzz on the sales floor. But something else that, you know, I think is a cornerstone of just running a team well, and something that we talk about a lot, is just the coaching conversation. And so one thing that we've definitely seen over the past few months is that people are really struggling with, crap, I didn't have structure to my coaching program, and it was very reliant on people being face-to-face. So yeah, can you just sort of speak, really, I'll actually kick this to Garrett first. Like, how have you seen the quality of calling Chris out? No, have you seen some bumps from sort of transitioning from, hey, I can meet with Chris one-on-one and pick his brain, or he's sitting right there with me, so I can literally like put somebody on hold and be like, hey, can we do that? You know, like those kind of things. Like, what, how has it changed going remote, and how does that feel, just at least from the rep side? And then Chris, same question, but just from how have you had to change everything, and what can you kind of impart wisdom wise on folks about coaching and structuring those?
Yeah, so I'll kind of brag on Chris here for a second. He does an outstanding job at making sure that our one-on-ones are set up, that we have good questions ahead of time, so we kind of know what we're coming into the meeting to talk about. Makes it easy to not only talk about strategy, but kind of go back and execute on strategy, which is really important, not to just talk about it, but to actually do something about it. Mm-hmm. So Chris does a great job of setting up those recurring one-on-ones. And then also equally as helpful, or more helpful in some cases, is the call coaching that we do with our team lead, Andy Dewey. I'm sure if you guys are on this webinar, you probably heard of him as well.
One of them has called you, probably.
No doubt. But Andy call coaches on a weekly basis. Same concept there. He sends out a list of questions. We kind of plug in a chorus link of our call recordings, kind of talk through objections that we've handled for the week. And as like the peer-to-peer piece has been huge for me. Not only that, but Chris being an open book, obviously I can Slack Chris, text Chris anytime, but the structured programs that we have on a recurring basis kind of help me know, okay, I can talk about this at this time, and here's the metrics I want to pull in, or here's the call recording that I want to talk about. So having the structure around that's been super helpful for me.
Marcus has a question, and just wants to know sort of, Oh, Chris answered it. It went away. Yeah. So how, and just for the whole group, if you didn't see that, or if you're, I don't know, driving down the road, how often are one-on-ones and how long are they? Yeah. And Chris, any other sort of structural changes in the transition or just advice that you can give for really running a remote coaching program the right way?
Yeah. So we do 30 minutes once a week. And then the call coaching is also 30 minutes once a week. Yeah. And if you're managing people, I think this is the most valuable 30 minutes that you're going to have throughout the week. Especially now, it's just so important that we have really good communication and really check in on our folks. As Garrett mentioned, I think it's really important that you send agenda questions out prior, just so that the rep has time to think about what the responses are, and we can really make the best use of that time. So that's really important. And honestly, like one of the things I've changed is actually the nature of those questions from when we were in office versus now. I've said it on a couple different webinars, but the employee engagement is way more fragile right now than it's ever been before. And so it's really important to get a pulse on how are you as a human being doing right now?
Yeah.
Let's not talk about work for a second. Like, how are you doing? So that's like my first question now in our one-on-ones is like, outside of work stuff, how are things going? How are you doing? So that's one change I made. And another just quick tip, and I think this goes for in-office as well, but even if you don't have a lot on the agenda for that week, never skip your one-on-ones. That's just, even if your rep says like, I don't have anything either this week, like we can just, catch up next week. I think it's so important that you don't miss those and still have those check-ins.
I always try to do that. And then I'm always happy that they didn't let me do it. And I think that's a great point. Like, and it isn't just in our sales team here. Coaching obviously is just a huge, like I'm on the marketing team, but I have a weekly one-on-one as well. And do you have any other, and I'm just curious, like what are some of the other questions that you're asking? Are you typically are you guys always doing deal reviews, or what does that look like? And what's the most helpful?
Yeah, we're talking about a lot of times we look back on the previous week. I do a lot of one-on-ones on Mondays. And so we say like, what were some of your highlights and lowlights from last week? And then we look ahead at the coming week. So we talk about what are your goals this week? One of the questions I ask is, what do you need from me to help you like better win this week? So that's another thing. And then we also like take a moment to look at specific metrics. So like, Garrett, here are your goals for the week. I can see an ambition, like how you're tracking towards those. We update on any competitions that are going on, any deals that he may need help with or is stuck with. That's kind of the majority of the time.
Nice. Well, all right. We're going to move into our final segment I'm going to call it a segment of this because we're running out on time, but we had tons of questions. Probably by and large, the biggest questions that we had were just about how do you outbound right now? And Garrett, I will brag on, is on this webinar because he's really good at outbound calls and getting people to respond. And so one, I just want to learn what you're doing. Two, I have a little story. I think you know which one I want you to share. Actually, I'll just start there. So start out by telling us the story. So, I'm on the marketing team. We're constantly just trolling LinkedIn. If people are mentioning our people are talking about stuff. I'm sitting over here being annoying, being like, guys, go share that, retweet it. We're very engaged and active, or try to be as a company on LinkedIn, just because it's just great. And we learn so much, and there's so much happening in that environment there. But, it came across our purview that one of our prospects, and actually a partner that I work with, that Garrett was talking to, basically was like, we're not ready for this, but this was the best experience that I've had in recent years with an SDR. And so, just tell us a little bit about what that opportunity was, what that was like, and how you kind of got yourself kudos like that so publicly, what you did.
Yeah. So to kind of answer the first question, outbounding and prospecting right now is definitely tough. Obviously, given the last 5 or 6 months, it's gotten even harder. And to kind of segue into that story, the whole premise really behind my outreach is I want to be authentic. I want to be genuine. I'm not looking to be that SDR that blows up your inbox or sends you a bunch of spam email. So what I really try to do is just form actual relationships with people, not come in too strong, not ask for a meeting when I don't deserve it, not, try to take before I give. And so having that mentality top of mind is really important for my style of outreach because it's a social selling, relationship building approach. That's what I did actually with a prospect recently who got me the shout out you're talking about on LinkedIn. She's a lady named Rosalind, super awesome lady, but she works for a company called Clary. And I had been familiar with some previous conversations that we've had with Clary. But I didn't necessarily go into that yet. I wanted to kind of earn her respect to kind of talk to me. And so what I did was inquire about something she had been posting a lot about on LinkedIn, which was the role of RevOps. And so I mentioned kind of, hey, I'm still learning. I'm still new. RevOps looks like a pretty new role in the industry. I would love to learn more about it. And getting Rosalind to kind of open up and talk about RevOps and what that role did, and then correlating that back to ambition as a product, just sounded really smart. And I think it landed well with Rosalind. And that's just kind of the approach I take with a lot of social selling is look for something that people are passionate about, talk about that, and then try to correlate that back to our product. So that's what I did there.
And it worked. And I think that you hit the nail on the head where it is so tough right now and we're feeling it on our end. I'm sure obviously you are, but the more that we can have genuine, helpful conversations, I think, Josh Braun is a thought leader in our space and he calls it like making deposits before you can make withdrawals. And it's just logic. Yeah. It's like, how many times do you respond to somebody just blowing up your inbox with a bunch of, emails? Andrew Wood has a great question. Have you found that social selling is more effective than educational selling? Your thoughts on that? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of social selling, I guess, because it's something that I feel like I'm pretty competent at. And it's just something I enjoy doing. It kind of not only is good for the business, but it's really good for building a personal brand. So it's kind of why I lean on social selling a bit more than educational selling is it's a win-win. It's good for the business. It makes you look good. It makes your business look good. And it'll pay off down the road too, to kind of build a brand around yourself.
Going to Hollywood, American Idol right here.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Chris?
I was just going to jump in there and say, Garrett, like how many touch points do you think that you had with Rosalind before there was any like call to action?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I bugged her quite a bit about the RevOps role. She would respond and say, this is what RevOps did. And I would dig into it a little bit more. With there being prior history there at that account, I didn't really ask early because that was quite literally like, I'm familiar with current relationships going on. And so I don't want to step on any toes internally, but I do want to, kind of learn a lot more about what you're doing and see if there's an opportunity for us to step in and be a resource there. So probably, gosh, I don't know, probably 15 to 20 LinkedIn messages back and forth of, and that's another point. It's like on LinkedIn, on social, you can have those quick engagements with people and you can actually get into a conversation and get to know somebody and know their role. Whereas on email and on phone, it's a bit more transactional. It's, it's not as direct and easy to communicate. So that's another reason why I like LinkedIn.
Yeah, you got the kudos, right? You weren't. It's so easy for sellers to like on the first touch be like, "You want to take 15 minutes with me?" And you just really came off obviously as genuine there. So that's huge kudos to you.
How many? And this is now I'm just like just having a conversation with Garrett. Are you outside of LinkedIn? Are you involved in any communities? For instance, I know Slack is a huge sort of emerging place because there are starting to be all these little buckets of communities that are springing up. Have you found that to be successful, and do you use those?
Yeah, sure. There's tons of cool resources out there specifically for SDRs. There's an SDR podcast. There's several SDR LinkedIn pages where they do weekly meetups just with SDRs, and we all get on a Zoom and we talk about like what's going on in the market and a new role that nobody might have heard about. Slack community channels are huge. I would say just in large, using the SDR community and really the sales community as a whole as a resource is something that a lot of people are usually open to, especially if a sales leader has previously been an SDR. They're kind of empathetic towards, okay, I've been in your shoes. I understand where you're at. So if you can genuinely come across as hey, I'm just trying to learn, I'm trying to build a relationship, a lot of people go for that. And yeah.
Cool. Other questions. Let me see. How after how many outreach attempts should you stop or do the breakup message? What are your thoughts on that, both of you?
Yeah, I hate sending breakup emails, but I do it. I think one way you can do breakup emails is to kind of throw some humor in there. You literally have nothing to lose, right? You've already given them all you've had. You've called them, you've touched them on social, you've emailed them, you've sent them resources. So the breakup email usually comes from me like step 15 to 20 after I've already sent them several emails, called, and I try to just work some humor into there so that, because like I said, you have nothing to lose. So yeah, that's kind of what I do for breakup emails.
What does that look like, Chris? Is Garrett the exception or the rule?
No. I think I would say on average, our sequences are about 15 to 18 touches. And I've seen a number of different stats, but in the past, I think it's something like 12 to 13 touches on average it takes to like really get someone's attention. And so that's why we have sequences that long. So I mean, I guess it really depends on how valuable the prospect is, how the length in between touches. But yeah, ours are about 15 to 18 touches, and the last email is the good old breakup.
I have a question, and this is for both of you, but Garrett has a distinct style and it really suits his personality, but how could you scale that across the team if you're not a Garrett, or is it just hire a bunch of Garretts? What does that look like?
That's the money question.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah. What do you think?
Jamie, I kind of love this question because it gives me a chance to kind of brag on ambition leadership.
Oh.
Being one of the first SDRs in our organization, or the first, I didn't really come into the job with like those daily, weekly KPIs or metric expectations. And what that did for me was give me the opportunity to really explore, does social selling work? And I found that it does work, and it actually works really well. And the problem there is social skills are hard to teach. Not everyone wants to be a social butterfly. So how do you scale that? I think is kind of the golden question, because it's not for everybody. I have a rep, or I have a colleague, Andy Dewey. I'll bring him up again. He is social, but his bread and butter is cold calls. So you wouldn't take a guy like Andy Dewey and force social onto him. So I think it's just the opportunity I was given, the autonomy and trust I was given to kind of explore, does that work, has meant a lot to me, to be able to like have that creative freedom and kind of play with building a personal brand as I'm learning and career developing as well. Yeah. So I don't have a magic answer for how do you scale it. I know that's something we've talked about. But, I'm thankful that I've had the opportunity to kind of play around with it and see some success with it and kind of go from there.
That's awesome. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think when you have reps like Andy and Garrett, you know, everybody's going to have a little bit of a different superpower, you know. And I think what's important is both of those guys are really open to sharing those learnings with the team. And so the best thing that I can do is just try to foster an environment where those guys still be successful in whatever lane that they're in, but we're sharing those learnings across the team, trying to now document that a little bit more. And just, yeah, and I think that's the best attempt to try to replicate some of those best practices.
All right. Well, I think we've answered all the questions that have come. Oh, wait, one more. Have you found a way to incentivize creativity to empower your reps to find their own voice and style? I think this is an awesome question to end on. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, there's certain metrics that we're trying to promote, right? And they're more of those big objective, monthly objective type things. You know, I would say in this case, what you could do is focus more on those like monthly end goals and maybe focus less on the activities. Because for instance, you know, if Garrett's focused on social selling and Andy's focused on cold calling, they may end up at the end of the month with the same KPIs, but the leading metrics that get them there are going to be a little bit different. And so that's maybe one way you can do it is if you trust your reps, say, you know, whatever cadences, whatever channels you want to use to ultimately get you that goal, we're okay with, as long as, you know,
As long as you get there. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I do think now I'm going to pitch. No, I do think that is sort of the unique use case of a lot of people using ambition, not just to run a game, not just for coaching, but because you can personalize the scorecard, but it still can aggregate like the team goals and the team initiatives, but it can be very, very focused and still quantifiable on an individual level. And it can be completely different, and I love that example in the beginning. One of the most tangible applications is like, I'm brand new, but I want to compete with Garrett, but you can't go toe to toe with Garrett yet. You don't even know what we're selling. Like, we need to make sure you can like write an email, but like you can still be successful and be incentivized. I think if you have a smart leader like Chris, who's ensuring that like what you're being measured on is correct. So, guys, I hate to cut this off. I'm learning a lot myself and enjoying this. But like I said, please, if you have any questions for us, reach out to Garrett on LinkedIn, Garrett Sadler or Chris O'Connor. You can reach out to them directly there. I'm Jamie. I'm going to send you some marketing emails after this. I'm definitely going to send the recording, but I'll send templates and some other resources that we mentioned throughout this so that you've got tools at your disposal. But please let us know, raise your hand if there's something that we didn't cover that you want to know about, or if you just think of something later, and any one of us is happy to point you in the right direction. So yeah, well, I had fun. So yeah, see you guys later, and have a good day.
All right, see you guys.